It was a disappointing loss for the Orioles in extra innings on Wednesday night against the Rays, but maybe even more disappointing, they could lose Tyler Wells to injury for an extended time. We'll talk about that, plus what the Orioles could do if they decide to be maybe buyers at the trade deadline on Tuesday. That's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, July 28th, 2022, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to start by recapping a tough Orioles loss as they fall 6-4 in 10 innings on Wednesday night against the Tampa Bay Rays, dropping them back to 500 on the season. Then we'll get to a little bit of a look at the Orioles. And, if they decide to be both buyers and sellers at the deadline, what kind of players would they target in a potential trade? And then finally get you updated on Terrin Vavra, who has not yet appeared in a game, but was called up to the big leagues for the first time on Tuesday. So we'll get to all that on this episode. But first, just want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcast listening platforms. And remember, the only Orioles podcast out there that you can get Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Plus, we're here on YouTube. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And again, we thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. And for your first listen today, let's start with an Orioles loss. Rays 6, Orioles 4 is the final score in 10 innings on Wednesday night from Oriole Park at Camden Yards. And the loss drops the Orioles back to 500 at 49-49 on the season. However, the Red Sox did lose to the Guardians on Wednesday night, so the O's stay in fourth place in the AL East, a half game ahead of Boston. And I'm going to get to the 5 things you need to know from this Orioles extra innings loss. And the first thing you need to know is really the worst news from this game. Worse than the fact that the Orioles lost is that Tyler Wells left this game with injury. He was in there in the 5th inning with the Orioles trailing 3-2, threw a pitch, and didn't look good. Threw a pitch to Yandy Diaz. Now, I will say, it was not an arm injury. The Orioles called it a lower back injury. And we'll see, how long he is out. We don't really have any further word besides a lower back injury as I'm recording this here at 11 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday night. But he threw the pitch to Diaz. It was a ball, immediately kind of hunched over, shook his side out a little bit, and then doubled over again. Brandon Hyde and Chris Holt, an athletic trainer, came out of the dugout, looked at Wells, and didn't even try to throw another pitch or whatever it may be, just came right out of the game and was relieved by Dylan Tate. Wells has had a little bit more struggles recently. I mean, his final line in the start, because Tate came in and gave up an RBI double, was 4 1/3 innings, 4 runs on 6 hits, 5 Ks, no walks, and 2 homers allowed, 69 pitches, 7 hard hit balls, and now a 3.90 ERA. That's what it's jumped to for Tyler Wells. But it's concerning, obviously, because Wells for most of the year has been the Orioles' best starting pitcher, maybe not as much so lately. But it's extra concerning because, A, the Orioles already have pitching injuries. Obviously, John Means out for the year with Tommy John. Grayson Rodriguez, who we never saw in the big leagues, we maybe at best will see in September after the lat strain. You've got DL Hall still in AAA for some reason. You got Kyle Bradish, who's about to be back, but he's been on the injured list for a while with his shoulder injury. And with all these pitching injuries, the rotation is starting to falter a little bit. And with Wells leaving in the 5th inning, it makes it 10 consecutive starts without a quality start for the Orioles rotation. You have to go back to July 12th in Chicago when Jordan Lyles allowed 2 runs over 7 innings against the Cubs. That's the last time the O's have a quality start. So it's a little concerning. Even if Wells misses not extended time, but some time, he's going to have to be replaced. You would hope that replacement is DL Hall, despite his rough outing on Tuesday night in Norfolk when he gave up 6 runs and recorded just 2 outs. You would hope it would be DL Hall. It's probably more likely going to be Kyle Bradish, who's coming off the IL soon, or potentially Matt Harvey, or maybe even Bruce Zimmerman. I would love for it to be Hall, but obviously we'll wait for more information on Wells' injury. But it was a tough scene to see him leave that game. Second thing you need to know from this one is that Randy Arozarena just continues to kill the Orioles. He has been fantastic in his career against Baltimore, been an Oriole killer since he came to the big leagues, and he did it again on Wednesday night. Got the game-winning hit, a 2-run double in the top of the 10th inning off of Jorge López that gave the Rays their 6-4 lead, and came up with the bases loaded and nobody out and just took a ball off the wall in right field, went the other way on a fastball to drive in 2. One of his 2 hits on the day, a single and a double, and those 2 RBIs in a 2-for-5 for Arozarena. And it came off of Jorge López, who, didn't have his best stuff in the game on Wednesday night. He entered in the 10th in a 4-4 game. Of course, the zombie runner is on second. Now, got a little unlucky. He allowed an infield single to Yandy Diaz to start the inning on just a chopper that, you'd love to be an out, but it was just hit too slowly. Then he goes 3-2 on Brandon Lau and walks him, and then he gets behind Arozarena and does serve up the double. Now, to Lopez's credit, after that, he goes intentional walk, then they get a ground ball and get the force at home, and then he gets a 6-4-3 double play. So he gets out of the inning, keeping it at just 6-4 when the bases were still loaded with nobody out. It could have gotten much, much worse. He still gave the O's a chance to come back in the bottom of the 10th, but he had to throw 26 pitches, and he pitched on Tuesday night, which means he's probably not available for the day game on Thursday if the Orioles need a save. But, not the best from Lopez, but of course, it seems like it always has to be Randy Arozarena. Third thing you need to know from this one is that, the Orioles got another big moment from Jorge Mateo, who is now on a 9-game hitting streak for the Orioles and a 12-game on-base streak. He had a 2-for-4 in this game, but of course the big one was the game-tying home run. With 1 out and nobody on in the bottom of the 9th and the Orioles trailing 4-3, Jorge Mateo comes up and takes a fastball that was right at the top of the zone and just cranks it the other way, hits it off the top of the wall in right center field for a game-tying solo shot off of Colin Poche. Of course, Poche is the one who gave up the go-ahead 2-run homer to Ramon Arias back in Tuesday night's game. He gives up the homer to Mateo in the 9th on Wednesday night's game. 103 off the bat, traveled 398 feet out to right center field for the Mateo home run. And obviously, it did not lead to a victory. You kind of felt like, here go these comeback O's again, down to their last 2 outs, and Mateo delivers. And then you really did think the O's were going to win the game there in the 9th. Cedric Mullins strikes out, but then Adley Rutschman draws a 2-out walk. Trey Mancini singles into left field, and it's down to Anthony Santander, and he had a long battle with Poche, but finally Poche did strike him out to send the game to extra innings. I really did think Santander was going to come through there. The 9th inning just had the vibes of another Orioles comeback win, but it wasn't to be. And then the O's offense just didn't get it done in the bottom of the 10th with the zombie runner. Ryan Mountcastle crushed the ball to right field, but it just hung up on the warning track for out number 1. And then you had just the O's not being productive. Austin Hayes striking out, Rougned Odor grounding out to end the game. And the O's lose it 6-4 in what is a disappointing loss, but at least, you can take the positive out that, hey, they did at least somewhat complete a comeback to tie it once again on Wednesday night. Fourth thing you need to know from this one, speaking of the Oriole offense, I just mentioned that Trey Mancini had a single in the 9th. He finally stopped his skid, had a 2-for-4 on the night with a couple of singles and a walk, reaching base 3 times in the game, and snapped his 0-for-26 streak with a hit that came in the 5th inning. It was a single down the line, and then a couple of throwing errors allowed Adley Rutschman to score on the play and Mancini to advance to second. Made it a 4-3 game at the time. Just kind of an inside-out job and dropped it in down the right field line, and then, of course, had the screamer of a single in the 9th inning. He's been swinging it much better over the past couple of games, and Mancini finally rewarded. Although, you got to respect, the long con that Mancini was playing. Having an 0-for-26 stretch right before the trade deadline probably makes it a little bit harder for the Orioles to trade him, and I'm not going to argue if he stays an Oriole because another team is a little wary about the slump he's in right now. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from this one is that although Jorge Lopez did, take the loss and didn't have his best stuff in the 10th, otherwise the Oriole bullpen was locked down and allowed them the chance to come back in this game. Now, Dylan Tate did allow the RBI double to the first batter he faced after replacing the injured Wells in the 5th, but After that, Dylan Tate went an inning and a third scoreless with 3 strikeouts. Nick Vespi an inning and a third scoreless with 2 strikeouts. Felix Bautista a 1-2-3 inning with 2 Ks. Keegan Aiken a scoreless 9th with a strikeout. And, the Oriole bullpen before it got to Jorge Lopez had thrown 14 2/3 scoreless innings in this series against the Rays until Lopez gives up the 2 runs. Of course, only one of them earned in the top of the 10th. They have been dominating and keeping the Orioles in these games, allowing them to come back just not enough in the end on Wednesday night as the Orioles lose it 6-4 in 10 innings and drop back down to 500 on the season. But they will go for a series win and will go to get back over 500 here on Thursday with a 12:30 start for Game 4, final game of the series. It's Mo Gabba Day at the ballpark as well, Orioles and Rays. But of course, we are less than a week away, just 5 days away now from the MLB trade deadline. And the question continues to be, what will the Orioles do? They're 49-49. They're 4 games out of a playoff spot at the moment. So the question becomes, what should they do, really? And the answer is, well, I'm not really sure what exactly they should do. Should they be buyers? Should they be sellers? Should they be somewhere in between? It's going to be really interesting to see what the Orioles do at this deadline. But if they do want to be buyers, coming up next, I'll talk about some of the guys they could target in trades to help out this team, not just for the rest of this year, but in the next few years as the Orioles are ready to compete in the American League. But first, got to tell you about Sports Card Investor, maybe the most exciting new sponsor we have here on the network. Welcome to the world of sports cards reimagined. The Sports Card Investor app is the hobby's most powerful resource. Quickly check the value of your favorite cards, find great deals, and profit from the hobby you love. Available completely free in the Google Play and Apple App Stores, the Sports Card Investor app is a must-have for baseball fans. Now, the app is free. I'll tell you that a million times. But there's so many cards you can browse from every single sport, not just baseball, and you can check the latest values of your favorite cards with 7-day or 30-day charts and find the best prices. And here's the best part. You don't have to go to some other website to make your purchase. You can buy directly through the app with their eBay Deals feature. So download the Sports Card Investor app today, available for free in the Google Play and Apple App Stores, or go to sportscardinvestor.com/lockedon. So the Orioles fall 6-4 in 10 innings to the Rays on Wednesday night in Game 3 of a 4-game series against Tampa. But the trade deadline is, of course, coming up. Now just 5 days away, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, August 2nd. And before we get to some trade deadline talk, just want to thank you again for making Locked On Orioles your first listen every day. But we've got the MLB trade deadline, of course, coming up on August 2nd, and Locked On MLB has all the breakdowns. Now, Locked On Orioles right here will have your rapid reactions to any move that the Orioles make. So subscribe now to your favorite Locked On channel, specifically Locked On Orioles on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get notified when each episode premieres for all of the trade deadline content. And speaking of trade deadline content, most people are probably not sure what the Orioles are going to do. I think they're going to trade a couple of guys. I talked about it on yesterday's episode, least to most likely to be traded. But I certainly think Mike Elias could target some guys to bring into this Orioles organization. I'm not talking about prospects. I'm talking about major league players. And I really do think that if Elias does do that, it's going to be controllable starting pitching. Young starting pitchers who are signed through beyond this year, through at least 2023 and probably beyond. And, will it be as part of another deal where the Orioles are sending away major leaguers? Could be. It could be maybe a deal where the Orioles are just trading from their minor league pool, although that's probably less likely. But I wanted to go through some options for the Orioles if they are to do that, which I think this could be the time to pursue a controllable young starting pitcher. So, there's a couple guys we've talked about already on the podcast, Pablo López being one of them, the right-hander from the Miami Marlins. We had Aram Layton on a couple weeks back, great episode talking about, what it would take for the Orioles to get Pablo López. We talked about a trade kind of centered around Anthony Santander and Kyle Stowers and maybe one more solid Orioles prospect to get López. But, he signed through 2024. He's got a 3.03 ERA in 20 starts this season. And the report from earlier this week was that the Marlins are willing to trade, quote, anybody but Sandy Alcantara, their ace, who is probably going to win National League Cy Young this year. The Marlins have a plethora of young starting pitching, and they have no bats to help them out. So that's why we talked about, a bat like Santander for a pitcher like Lopez, and obviously the O's would have to give up more than that. But you would have to give up some prospect capital. I think the Marlins would certainly want a major league hitter. And I think that's why you give them Santander. And then a player like Stowers and maybe another prospect like a Joey Ortiz or Cesar Prieto or, whoever it may be. It would take a lot to get a guy like Pablo Lopez to the Orioles. But if Mike Elias could do it, it would be a huge, huge pickup for him and the O's. Because, frankly, that's an ace right there if Elias can get him. Now, he's not the only guy they could go after, and he would be pretty pricey. But another guy they could go after that I've talked about on this podcast as well is Tyler Mahle, right-handed pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds. Now, he is signed through 2023, so you'd only get him for a year and a half, but he could really anchor your rotation heading into next season. Now, he has a 4.48 ERA and 18 starts, but he's got a 3.78 FIP, which means his numbers should be better than there are. He's being hurt basically by playing in one of the most hitter-friendly ballparks in the league, in Great American Ballpark. His numbers on the road are way better than his numbers at home, and this newly minted pitcher's park at Oriole Park could certainly help out Tyler Mahle. And, he's almost 10 strikeouts per 9 on the season. Home run numbers aren't terrible despite playing in a hitter's ballpark. And as we know, as we saw this offseason, we're going to continue to see, the Cincinnati Reds are sellers right now, and they're going to trade off anybody who's probably a free agent after this year and a free agent after next year. And Tyler Mahle is one of those guys. Now, I don't think the O's would need to part with major leaguers, but it would probably take one of the top prospects. I'm not talking, a Grayson Rodriguez or a DL Hall or Gunnar Henderson, but it might take a Kobe Mayo or a Kyle Stowers type, plus another prospect thrown in, maybe a couple more to get Tyler Mahle. They're going to want to get a good haul because they don't have to trade him at this deadline. But I think, Mahle will definitely be cheaper than Pablo Lopez, but could provide that same amount of production for the Orioles over the next year and a half. So certainly that's someone I would target, although he is unvaccinated. So obviously something to think about when you do have to go to Toronto a lot. Now, another guy who came up just earlier this week is Tarik Skubal, left-handed pitcher for the Detroit Tigers, who is signed through 2026. He's been a stud from the left side since the Tigers called him up. And for some reason, the Tigers, after spending some money this offseason, trying to take that next step, they've been horrendous. And reports are from earlier this week from Ken Rosenthal that they might be sellers again, and not just their upcoming veteran free agents like Michael Pineda and Jonathan Scope. No. Like some of their young guys and some of their young pitching might be on the move. And the report said that Tarik Skubal is available. They are listening. Now, this would take an absolute prospect haul from the Orioles. I mean, you could throw an Anthony Santander into a trade like that, but he would certainly not be the centerpiece. He would help get a guy like Skubal because the Tigers are looking for bats. They have the worst offense in baseball, and a bat like Santander, who's controlled through 2024, would be a good addition. But you're going to have to throw in some serious guys. I'm talking Kobe Mayo. I'm talking maybe Colton Cowser. I'm talking Kyle Stowers, Joey Ortiz, Cesar Prieto, maybe a Terrin Vavra, Mike Baumann. Not all those guys at once, but you're talking 3, 4 plus prospects the Orioles would have to part with to get Tarik Skubal. Is that a lot? Yes. Could all 4 of those guys you part with turn out to be good players? Yes. Do the Orioles have a guy in their system besides Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall who could be good enough or better than Tarik Skubal? I don't think they do. And quite frankly, there's a chance that Skubal is better than Hall. Now, I don't know if he's going to be better than Rodriguez. I think Grayson Rodriguez is going to be pretty good. But Tarik Skubal has had a good track so far. He has a 3.88 ERA in 19 starts. But, I mean, you look at his numbers. He's got a 2.92 FIP. He's been hurt by his defense basically more than any pitcher in baseball this year. You get him, in front of a much better defense in Baltimore with, a similar park, maybe a little more pitcher friendly, and pitching on, honestly, a better team. Yeah, I would love Tarik Skubal. And you know what? I'd give up big prospect capital. As long as the O's don't have to part with Henderson, Hall, or Rodriguez, I'd put together a big package of prospects to go get Tarik Skubal. But, of course, there are some other names who would maybe cost less to the O's and moves that they can make. There's some other guys with the Marlins. Pablo López is the big name, but there's other guys that could be had. Edward Cabrera, former top prospect, coming off the injured list, still in his early 20s. They're not really sure where he fits into the rotation long term. Again, that would take some hitting prospects from the O's, but they could go get him. Maybe if they want to go cheaper, and Eliezer Hernandez from this Marlins team, who has kind of been pushed out of their rotation. He's been the odd man out. He spent some time in AAA. He's had some home run issues, but still has some underlying data with some of his pitches that look solid. Could be a project for the O's where you get a guy fairly cheap and try to rework him into your rotation. You got the Mets guys that we talked about earlier this week with Ryan Finkelstein of Locked On Mets. As we talked about a potential Trey Mancini and Jorge López to the Mets trade. You've got the guys like, Tyler McGill and David Peterson, who, the Mets are pretty stacked in their rotation. And, if there is a potential Mancini trade, I would target one of those guys trying to get them back because they're MLB ready to slot right into your rotation. And then there was one other name I wanted to bring up who will come much cheaper and is not as sexy as these other guys, but could help them out. And that is right-handed pitcher Brad Keller of the Kansas City Royals. Now, Keller is a free agent after 2023, so we'd get him for a year and a half. And he's not going to light the world on fire. He does not have big strikeout numbers, but a 4.16 ERA in 18 starts this year, over 101 innings. You'll take that help in your rotation. Now, only 6 Ks per 9 and 3 walks per 9 is not a great number, but he gets some ground balls. He can eat some innings. And maybe the Orioles see something there. Maybe, as Kansas City will probably be sellers again. They've already started. They traded Andrew Benintendi to the New York Yankees on Wednesday night, so they've already started selling off pieces. Keller's a guy who's been in their rotation, but I don't necessarily think they're going to try to re-sign. That could be a guy who the Orioles just kind of make an under-the-radar move. It would take maybe one prospect and not one of the big names to go get a guy like Brad Keller. It would be cheap. It would still be an upgrade into the Orioles rotation right now. Maybe someone they could work with heading into next year. Just an idea of someone who could be available. But, I don't see the Orioles being big-time, go-for-it buyers, and they're not going to be sell-it-all-off sellers. It's going to be somewhere in the middle, and if they do acquire major league talent, I think it's got to be a controllable starting pitcher, and those are just some of the options. Obviously, guys like Luis Castillo and Frankie Montas and others are out there. They're probably a little out of the Orioles' price range, but hey, swing a deal. Keep the excitement going at Camden Yards. But one more thing to get to here on today's episode, something we didn't touch on Wednesday's pod, is that Terrin Vavra is in the big leagues. We haven't seen him debut yet, but he is here. We'll talk a little bit about Vavra and what he could bring to the Orioles coming up next. So we're talking Terrin Vavra here on the podcast to finish out a Thursday episode, who was called up by the Orioles on Tuesday to replace Jonathan Arauz. Now, Arauz, who slid into second, trying to stretch a single into a double in the 8th inning on Monday night and was injured, had to leave the game. Orioles placed him on the 10-day injured list, broke one of his fingers, it looked like, sliding into second, so we'll see how long that recovery takes. But the Orioles needed an infielder to replace him. They obviously could have gone with someone like Rylan Bannon, who has already been in the big leagues this year, can obviously play second and third base. But the O's instead went with the hot bat at AAA and the higher-ranked prospect in Terrin Vavra. Vavra, who is 25 years old, if you're not familiar, a left-handed hitter who was a third-round pick of the Rockies back in 2018 and came over to the Orioles along with Tyler Nevin and Michel Deson in the Michael Givens trade at the deadline back in 2020. Now, this year, he's been lighting it on fire in AAA. Now, he's had multiple injuries that have kept him out for solid chunks of the year, but he's played in 45 games for the Norfolk Tides this year in 208 plate appearances. He's hitting .324 with a .435 on base and a .451 slugging. Now, not a big-time power hitter, but despite that, he still has a 145 WRC plus. With only 2 home runs in over 200 plate appearances, he does have 14 doubles. He is 5 for 6 stealing bases. 18 walks to 36 strikeouts. Not amazing, not terrible in kind of the walk to strikeout ratio, but He can move around defensively on the diamond. Now, I wouldn't call him a plus defender at any of the position he plays, but you can certainly put him out there and feel solid about it. Now, he's mainly a second baseman, but he has played shortstop, third base, center field, and left field in his minor league career, so he definitely has some versatility, can move out to the outfield. Now, one thing that has helped him, he has a 400 BABIP on the season in AAA. That is batting average on balls in play. Anything above 300, usually you got a little luck on your side, and if you're at 400, you probably got a lot of luck on your side. So, if he goes back to AAA for a while, that average of 324 will probably come down. But right now, he is here to help the Orioles. Now, he was never going to be in Tuesday's lineup after he was recalled because, the O's didn't know they were going to have to place Ariuz on the IL until Tuesday. So they kind of scrambled to get Vavra to the big leagues. He had to fly in. He actually arrived right around first pitch on Tuesday, so he was never going to enter that game. And then the Orioles did not put him in Wednesday's lineup. So we'll see if he's in the lineup to make his major league debut on Thursday. But whenever he does, he's going to help the O's off the bench. He'll play some second base. I'm assuming he probably won't play any other position. Obviously, at third, you have Arias and Nevin kind of rotating now. Vavra will be the guy who will play some second when Odor sits. Now, the one thing about those two is, obviously, they're both left-handed hitters, so you're not going to platoon them. So we'll see if maybe Vavra does start against a lefty because that's when they sit Odor. But he can play short and third and some outfield if you need him to. Again, he's not going to be in the lineup every day at this point. But he's going to get some chances before, Ariuz is off the IL or before Henderson or Westberg gets called up because he is part of the Orioles system. Most places have him. I think every place has him as a top 15 prospect. Some places have him as high as at the bottom part of the top 10 in their prospect rankings. He's always been able to hit from the left side, not necessarily for big power, but a good hit tool. It's okay, above average defense, and he runs fairly well on the bases and had a great college career at Minnesota, was an All-American there for the Gophers. Just a player that I've liked since his college days. Was very happy the Orioles traded for him and very happy to see him in the big leagues. I hope he does get some regular at-bats. Obviously, we've seen a guy like Rylan Bannon this year come up a couple of times and not really get regular playing time. I don't think Vavra, again, is going to be in there every day, but he'll spell Odor. He'll spell maybe Arias. Could even spell Mateo a few times because he can play some shortstop. And, we will see what he can do. But cool to see another one of these top prospects up in the big leagues. Hopefully another of many to come this season for the Orioles. But what's to come here on the podcast? Well, we got one more episode here this week coming up on a Friday pod to end the week. Of course, we'll recap Game 4, the day game between the Orioles and the Rays. Get you the 5 things you need to know from that one. We'll preview the weekend series as the O's head to Cincinnati to take on the Cincinnati Reds for 3 games. That team has not been good this year, so hoping for an Orioles sweep. And, we'll talk some more trade deadline stuff. We'll be even closer and closer to the deadline. And, hey, of course, if the O's make a move between now and then, we'll talk about all of it coming up on Friday's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.